Damon Martin, MMA fighting here with a fighting legend in his own right. He is a commentator, he is an analyst, and maybe one day a fighter again, too, I hope. Welcome in, Dan Hardy. Dan, how are you?
Really good, man. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for taking the time for me. How is everything? Obviously, you're busier than ever doing commentary, doing analyst stuff for your own channel, and as I mentioned, hopefully fighting again. You don't seem to slow down much these days.
No, no, we've got a few things going on. We've obviously we're doing some stuff with One Championship, producing some content for them, trying share the love and educate the fans a bit on their roster because they've got some awesome fighters over there. We've just done a partnership with Glory as well with their pay-per-view partners for the UK. So we're going to be doing some more kickboxing stuff and K1. And yeah, looking at maybe getting this John Wayne Parr fight sorted out. That's what I'm focused on at the moment. Back in the gym, working with the team and stuff, and just feeling good. And that fight very much excites me. So I'm hoping we can get it sorted.
Well, let me start there because I know you're doing some work with One Championship, and I saw the tweet exchange. I saw John Wayne Parr, kind of offer to fight you, and you obviously responded. Nothing but respect there. But Cage Muay Thai, which I love, by the way, that's like when I watch those fights at One Championship, I'm literally on the edge of my seat. It's insane to watch Muay Thai with freaking 4-ounce gloves. But what was it? I mean, obviously, I know when you fight again. I know you said very adamantly you want to fight again, but you've said it has to make sense. I imagine John Wayne Parr makes sense.
It does, especially for Muay Thai. I wouldn't feel as good about fighting him in MMA, but stepping into his arena and doing it in the small gloves, it makes so much sense. He's a veteran of the sport. He's so well respected. The stakes would be high with me going in there because, the majority of people would be expecting me to get my ass kicked. So, it gives me something to prove. And I like the respect from John. I was actually commenting on One Championship's post about who they should sign, saying they should get Jimmy Warled signed, who's one of my, my good friends and colleagues at Hardy Warled. But John Wayne Parr said, that he'd face me. And I just think that, Muay Thai in a cage in small gloves against one of the best to ever done it. I mean, that just seems like a perfect opportunity to me. Especially given the fact that John is, he's such a well-respected fighter. It excites me to train for it because I know a lot of people will be working against, counting against me in the fight, which forces me to work harder.
Yeah. In that regard, One Championship, that's one option they present that a lot of other organizations don't. Obviously they have kickboxing, they have Muay Thai, and I've talked to a lot of the fighters who compete there, and they love that opportunity to know that they could cross over, know they can do different things if they want to. And in a way, One Championship, and I know Chatri Sityodtong encourages it. If guys want to do that, girls want to do that, he welcomes that. Do you enjoy that a promotion of that size is potentially giving you an opportunity to do something like a cage Muay Thai match, which you would probably never do? And we got to be honest, Muay Thai here in the States, like here in the United States and even in England, other places, it's just not that big. But One Championship, when they do it, they make it a show.
Yeah, I love the small gloves Muay Thai. I've fought Muay Thai a few times, but it's always been big gloves. And I think it does change the sport. The smaller gloves make it far more technical. With these high level fights, and that's another reason why I think we're seeing some of the older fighters winning belts over in one. I mean, Same's just lost his belt, but he's in his late 30s, and you can tell how technical he is. And I think with the smaller gloves and the greater experience, I think that that comes into play a lot more because the pockets to get through are so much wider for the shots. But at the same time, the option to then try a kickboxing match and focus on a different rule set, different opponents, and then MMA as well. It wouldn't surprise me at all if I fight under all three rule sets for one. Obviously John Wayne Parr makes sense for Muay Thai, so that's the small gloves. But then maybe after that, Nicky Holskin for kickboxing, it would maybe make sense to fight him under rule sets that he's more comfortable with. But we could do small gloves as well. And then MMA, I mean, if I'm dieting down and getting back to 170, it opens up good options. The likes of Shinya Aoki's over there, the veteran of the game. I like the idea of switching between one rule set and the next. And I think because they've got a lot of young fighters on their roster that want to stay active and are eager to compete and are eager to test themselves in one range and the next, I think it's good to have the options. You know, you can fight more in bigger gloves. You can fight, you can fight more with, when it's 3-minute rounds in small gloves. You can, there's grappling matches coming up as well. Obviously, they're going to start making some more grappling only matches on one as well. So it's literally the home of martial arts, isn't it? It's the celebration of all the striking arts and grappling arts as well.
Yeah. To that point, let me ask Dan. I mean, obviously, I know you had to wait a while, and don't want to rehash bad memories here, but you had to wait a while to finally get your UFC release. When you did, I think a lot of people immediately said, "Well, there's going to be options." Obviously, if you fight again, there's going to be options. You're a big name, former title contender, all this kind of thing. So I'm sure you're going to have places interested in working with you. But it sounds like One Championship is almost the perfect place for you to land. Now, I don't know how deep in conversations you are with them. I know you're doing a little bit of work with them in the terms of like commentary analyst stuff, but how deep are we? Like how close? How close are we to seeing Dan Hardy back in the ring or the cage and potentially in a One Championship ring or a cage?
Well, I've already started preparing. I've already started bringing my weight down because I want to get to 174, 175, and be as close to 170 as possible. Because obviously, with the hydration testing, but it just makes sense. John Wayne Parr makes sense because he's such a veteran, and the stakes will be so high. Plus, it's small gloves, which makes it more interesting, and it's in a cage, which gives us more space to work. But then the possibility of fighting another legend like Nikki Holskin, another legend like Aoki. These are all options for me in one, and I could do 3 different rule sets and take out 3 guys that are really well respected. Obviously, the Diaz Lawler fight coming up, I would have loved to have been in the mix with for that conversation. But realistically, I feel like I have to prove myself to an extent. I think, I've been away for a long time, and I think a lot of people are expecting me to not be as competitive as I'm going to be in these fights, which is why it seems from the outside maybe like I'm biting off more than I can chew. But I'm looking at these guys and I know how I feel, I know how I move, I know what I can do, and I know I can beat them, and I don't have to do a lot of work to get big wins over big names over in one. Whereas, if I was still on the UFC roster, they'd have me fight 2-3 guys that are names that they're trying to build up. You know what I mean? They won't give me the opportunities. Like I pushed for the Matt Brown fight, he accepted it, and then they took Matt Brown in a different direction. I knew they weren't going to match me favorably after the whole, the whole separating and the Herb Dean thing and the firing and all that kind of stuff. The way that it all played out, I didn't feel safe being matched by the UFC. I felt like they would have it in for me.
Yeah. With that being said, as you're doing, analyst stuff with One Championship, there's this weird perception that if you're not in the UFC, you're not the best in the world, which is ridiculous. I had a conversation with Rory McDonald when he was about to make his PFL debut, and he said, I'm on a mission to become best in the world again, but I don't need to be in the UFC to do it. And obviously, we just saw this past weekend, AJ McKee picks up a huge win over Patricio Pitbull. You could argue very easily he's the best featherweight in the world. He's not in the UFC. One Championship, I'm a massive. We just saw Adriano Moraes. I think he's the best flyweight in the world. You beat Demetrius Johnson. You knock out Demetrius Johnson. You're the best flyweight in the sport. I don't care where you're at. You knock out Demetrius Johnson. You're the best flyweight in the sport. Look at Christian Lee, what that kid's doing over there. He's a freaking monster at lightweight. He's looked fantastic, and I have a hard time believing he couldn't go with anybody in any other organization in the world. Obviously it goes down the board on a lot of their champions, but do you find that, like, I know there's this bias where we all favor the UFC, and I get it. They are the biggest. I understand that, but there's this ridiculous notion that just because you don't fight in the UFC, you can't be the best. And I think that's utterly stupid, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think people are now realizing this. I think people are, obviously, you make a great point with AJ McKee. He's undefeated. He looks so slick against Pitbull, who was, what is he, 32 wins and 5 losses. Pitbull is a dangerous individual, and AJ McKee made that look relatively easy. And we've not really seen him, really tested. I would like to see him in the mix with the likes of Max Holloway and Volkanovski and such, because I think that's where we would see the best of his skills. Great point with the Moraes as well. And another name I would throw in there is Renier Derrida, who's a 2-weight champion over in one. He's a 6'4" Brazilian jiu-jitsu and judo black belt who was working at Korhemmer's gym in Holland. I think he's going to look devastating next time out. We already know how good his grappling skills are, and I could take him right now and put him in the mix at middleweight in the UFC, or maybe even light heavyweight. And I think he's problems for those guys. And also, with the options of guys stepping in and fighting Muay Thai and kickboxing, we're seeing the best of what what other combat sports have got to offer at the same time. So just the fights generally are a higher level.
Yeah. It's also funny because I know, listen, when you're in one championship, because they've tried to actually combat weight cutting, which is something we've unfortunately rarely seen outside of one championship in terms of their hydration testing and everything. But we have seen, a guy like Eddie Alvarez, who's a legend. There's no doubt about it. You know what I mean? Everyone's saying, well, Eddie's losing because he's fighting the bigger guys. And I completely disagree. And I know when I talked to Demetrius, he said the same thing. It's not that I'm losing because I'm fighting guys who are taller than me. I've been fighting guys taller than me since I started fighting. He's like, there's just really good guys that won championship, and we've seen Eddie has struggled. I mean, Eddie has, he has the one win over Foleyang, which is a great win, but he's struggled outside of that. And I don't think that's a knock on Eddie. I don't think that's a knock on the size. I think it's a knock on the fact that he's facing really good competition.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that fight against Ryu and Ok really is a good example of that. A relatively unknown fighter coming in. I think he was maybe 14-2 when he faced Eddie. But he looked incredible. And what we've discovered by, giving him that opportunity to face the likes of Eddie Alvarez is that we've found another contender, another prospect for, best in the world. And I think, his fight against Lapicus was disappointing. I think Eddie's intentions were good, but I think that the confusion around the striking area, and I do think there were illegal strikes and the referee did the right thing, but I also think Lapicus played it up a little bit. So I would like to see that rematch. But I don't think it's anything to do with the weight cut, with the hydration testing or anything. I think that's only a benefit. And I think any fighter that feels like the organization they're fighting for is putting their health as a priority over everything else. I mean, it's going to get more loyalty, more good performances because people are going to feel fresher, they're going to feel healthier, and they're also going to want to perform as well because they feel like they're being looked after.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like, like I said, listen, I get it. You want to see the biggest names in the biggest fights. We all understand that, but it seems like they do take a lot of the politics out of it. Like I loved, Demetrius came in day one. He didn't get a title shot. He jumped in the Grand Prix and then he earned a title shot. He got in there. Eddie, I've talked to Christian Lee when Eddie first got there. Christian was all about fighting Eddie, but Eddie had a loss. And then obviously, he had the disqualification and then he had another loss, and those kind of things. So you earn your way there, which I enjoy. And also, like I said, they're going to give you big opportunities. Everything that Eddie has done, he's been a main event or co-main event, I think, in every fight he's had. And I know that outside of the losses, they've all enjoyed working there. So, like I said, it's a great outlet to have.
It is, and I think the more we see these organizations on the rise, obviously Bellator had a fantastic event this weekend, as well as one championship on the Friday. I think the more fighters, obviously MMA is growing generally as well, and we need more space for these fighters to be competing. But I think that fighters are also realizing that the options are actually far greater. So, before they put pen to paper on one organization, they've got options to consider. Cage Warriors have just done a show in the US, in California. Obviously, PFL are very strong at the moment. Invicta have just changed hands, and I'm interested to see where they go. So it's an exciting time to be a part of MMA. And it's certainly, the options are starting to open up for fighters.
Absolutely. I know recently, Dan, listen, I don't want to turn this into let's badmouth the UFC because I'm not trying to do that in one shape or the other. But obviously, since you've left there, you've been more free to speak your mind. I understand when you work for a company, I get it. That's not your job to badmouth the company. I understand that. No one's going to fault you for that. But you have been outspoken. I saw a couple exchanges on Twitter. We talked about fighter pay, and we've had a big conversation about that recently. I'm sure you saw Cheyenne Bays on Saturday night. You might have seen the comments. She was crying about she was a negative in her bank account. How $50,000 is life-changing money. And I agree, it's absolutely life-changing money. I think we'd all like an extra 50 grand. But when you're fighting for the biggest organization in the world, that to me is a terrible look that one of your fighters on the co-main event of a card on ESPN is saying, I have no money in my bank account and I had to, get a loan to move to Vegas, all these kind of things. But we are seeing other options out there. We just saw AJ McKee earn $1 million in Bellator, winning one fight, won $1 million. We saw, obviously PFL has crowned a lot of $1 million champions. You know what I mean? So the options are out there now. And again, it just, what it's showing is you saw with Stipe. Stipe doesn't seem happy with what's going on in the heavyweight division. He was flirting. You saw your same post about one championship. I know Arjun Buller was immediately come on over. So we are seeing these guys understanding they have options now.
Yeah, and that's important. Obviously, there's the class action lawsuit going on at the moment, and the Ali Act is hoping. We're hoping that comes over to MMA. And I think that changes the market very much. I think it allows fighters to move more freely from one organization to the other to get what they're worth, instead of getting locked into a contract that gets extended indefinitely and then you're stuck. And I think that's going to be exciting, because then we'll start seeing the market open up. We'll start seeing that monopoly fall apart, and the market open up for the fighters. I agree. I mean, I was just talking with somebody else about the Cheyenne Bays thing. It's not a good look. I also don't think it's a good look to have someone like Brian Kelleher say, that he's looking for a YouTuber to fight so he doesn't have to get a job at Walmart after he's done with his career. And then there was the other fighter, the female fighter that she started a GoFundMe account. It's just not a good look, especially when, you've got fighters on one side starting GoFundMe accounts, and on the other side, the UFC are signing $175 million contracts where the fighters will not see a penny of it. It is disappointing. And the other thing as well is that, the environment that's been created by the UFC is everyone scrambling for the scraps. It's all about the bonuses. It's all about the bonuses. And why can it not be about the pay? Like, make sure these fighters are covered before they get in there, so they're not fighting at a deficit and hoping a bonus bails them out. The reality is we know the money's being made now. And I think Triller, and I think, some of these other organizations that have cropped up, the kind of celebrity YouTubers, whatever, they're poking fun at us a little bit, because they're making massive amounts of money. And we know that money's being made within the sport of MMA. It's just not finding its way to the fighters. And that's got to change. It has to change. It's been the same in other sports in previous times, and the shift has been moved over. So more than 50% or more profits come into the fighters, and that's how it should be. And we all know that. And I can say that as much as I want now.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that, because I had this conversation with Randy Couture, several weeks ago. We were talking about a guy like Jake Paul, kind of beating the drum and, kind of annoying Dana White with his fighter pay complaints. And a lot of people believe it's PR. I know when the one girl had her GoFundMe page, he ended up dropping whatever it was, like 10K or 20, whatever it was, a lot of 5K. I can't remember, it was a lot of money. And then Triller ended up dropping another one. I understand it's a PR move. We all understand that, but they're still putting their money where their mouths are. I mean, at the end of the day, PR move or not, you're dropping 25K on a fighter, 5K on a fighter. That kind of stuff matters. And I was talking to Steven Espinosa yesterday from Showtime, and he said, listen, Jake is a very vocal guy, but he's like, Jake's, on his undercard for the fight coming up at Tyron Woodley, he was a proponent to make sure the undercard fighters were getting paid. Like, he was pushing for them to get paid on his card. Like, yes, Jake is going to make the most money because he's the star, he's pushing the sales, but he's pushing like, hey, let's make sure they're, the undercard guys are getting paid. And he said the only other fight I've ever seen really push for that way is Floyd Mayweather. He said Floyd always battled for the undercard guys on his cards to get paid. And it's crazy that, one thing Randy said, he's like, it's kind of crazy that Jake Paul's the loudest voice. He's like, I hope something changes. I'm glad he's doing it, but he's like, it's kind of sad that Jake Paul, an influencer and technically a boxer, is the loudest guy making complaints about fighter pay.
It is disappointing, and it also reflects the control that the UFC has in the market. Obviously, we saw Stipe flirting a little bit. We've seen Ngannou recently make comments and that kind of thing. And I do think that generally, the awareness of the money being made compared to what's being paid out is coming to the forefront. And, the class action lawsuit and the Ali Act will push that forward as well. But I don't think there's a better advert for the other organizations than when the likes of Corey Anderson goes over to Bellator and's like, I'm getting paid way more than I was with the UFC. Paige Van Zandt going to bare knuckle boxing and making ridiculous amounts more than what she was with the UFC. It's bringing awareness to the fact that the money's being made. And what's frustrating on my part and what's disappointing for me generally is that, Brian Kelleher is a good example, right? We want Brian Kelleher, when he retires, to be happy and proud to have been a part of the UFC, to love the UFC because he felt like he was a part of something great, and to have enough money in his back pocket to go back to his hometown and open up a gym and train the next bunch of young fighters. But if these guys like Brian Benoit, I know he had a job with UPS for a while when he was considering retirement. We don't want to lose Ryan Benoit to UPS. We want him to have his MMA gym. We don't want Kelleher to be checking people out at Walmart. We want him to have his MMA gym or to be a judge or to be a referee or something. We need these guys within the sport, and it's neglecting the grassroots by underpaying the fighters. It's cutting off their options and then stifling the next generations of fighters. And that overall will affect the standard of MMA in years to come. If the UFC is smart, they'll start throwing a bit more cash around so the fighters can reinvest in the industry, because that's ultimately where their money's going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's like I said, I love that there are options now. Obviously, as I mentioned, you're doing some stuff with One Championship. There's an option. PFL is an option. Bellator is an option. And it's no longer this, you can only go one place to make money. There's money to be made out there. And so before I get you out of here, Dan, obviously, let me circle back to your own fighting career, because obviously I'm interested in seeing you fight again. You said you're already back in the gym. Obviously, we know some lineup there. So I know you've been itching to get back in there. Now, obviously, you've been busy. I saw you just started your Patreon channel. You've been doing a lot of stuff on YouTube, obviously. So you've been staying up, busy, obviously, commentary with Cage Warriors, things like that. But ideally, when could we see the Outlaw back in the cage of the ring? Is it realistic for 2021, 2022? Like, where's your head at right now?
It's realistic for the end of this year. The only difference is because I've had a couple of boxing matches offered, and the weight that I was putting forward was 185, because I was thinking, once I'm in shape, that'd give me an opportunity to to just not cut and be comfortable, to eat what I want through training camp, but still be in good shape. But then, the options were just not interesting. The opponents that they were offering me were guys I'd never heard of. One guy wanted to wear a head guard. I'm just like, this is not. I want to fight someone that I respect, someone that puts fear into me that I know that I'll be prepared for. And John Wayne Parr makes sense for a lot of reasons, because I respect him, because I've been a fan of him for a while, because I will love researching him and preparing for him. And also because I know he's going to push me and most people will be counting me out. And the idea of then venturing back down to, 170, 172, so I can be hydrated and on the weight. That's an additional goal for me, because I know that that's really where I perform at my best. Like 172, 175. When I was fighting over in Japan, they were my second fight in Japan. I literally walked on the scales because I knew I didn't have access to a sauna, and it's one of my best performances still. And if I could then transfer that over to Muay Thai with small gloves, where I don't have to worry about grappling and jiu-jitsu, I can it's a party. I mean, it's 3-minute rounds of pure Muay Thai violence with one of the best in the world. I mean, sign me up. That's the kind of thing that gets me excited. It's perfect. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I hope it happens. Like I said, I know they're doing big things at One Championship, and obviously you've got a lot of things going on with the analysts, with the commentary. So, Dan, thank you so much for taking the time. Obviously, I think, as everyone would say, I'm very excited the prospect you're actually be fighting again. I think we all want to see you back in there. Don't get me wrong. You've done a fantastic job with the analyst stuff, done a fantastic job with the commentary. I think you're one of the absolute best in the world with that. But I can't lie. I want to see you back in the ring. I want to see you back in the cage. I think we all do. So I hope this One Championship thing comes together. But otherwise, continue doing what you're doing, man. Obviously, it seems like you're always busy. Seems like you always got stuff going on. So thank you so much for taking the time. Good luck with the Patreon channel. I know that just got up and running. That's on your Twitter. People can check that out. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, David. It's always a pleasure talking to you, my friend. And I'm very much admiring that collection behind you. It makes me want to get my comics out and have a look through them. Good talking to you, my friend.
Talk to you soon, Dan.